wanted to be her knight in shining armor. He was in love with Renee.
Tree wound here, definitely in his mind, it was an execution.
Marriages are volatile. We often see two people marry in love but end that bond of holy matrimony in hatred and distrust for one another. Seeing a happy and loving marriage end up in divorce is tragic. But what is more sorrowful and complex than a divorce is to see one spouse take the life of the other. The story of Kimberley Renee Poole follows the same path. What started as a promise to always be there for each other ended in the most horrific and disastrous way possible. Kimberley Renee was a popular student at Richard J. Reynolds High School in North Carolina. One day in 1991, in the school parking lot, she met William Brent Poole. When the eyes of two teenagers met, the attraction between them was inevitable and they soon became a couple. But in 1995, Renee got pregnant. She was a 17-year-old freshman in high school and Brent was a 21-year-old senior in college. Taking full responsibility for his actions, Brent proposed to Renee. It was certainly going to be difficult for all the still immature couple to take on the responsibilities of adulthood, marriage, and parenthood, but soon the two married on June 9, 1995. Brent and Renee at the time said that the wedding was the happiest days of their lives, but what was to unfold will certainly prove that wrong. The couple bought a home in Mocksville near Winston-Salem in North Carolina. Renee spent her time as a housewife. Meanwhile, to support his new family, Brent worked as a mechanic in Charlotte. The pay was good and life was treating the two well. The couple welcomed their daughter in 1996. She was named Katie Poole. In the beginning, the two were extremely happy in their marriage and loved being parents, but soon the expenses of raising a baby started to take a toll on their finances and the two started facing financial issues. There was no option but for Renee to take up a job as well. In 1997, Brent, instead of requesting his wife to work in a respectable profession, proposed that Renee start working as a dancer in a strip club near their home called the Silver Fox. This advice or suggestion was the first big mistake that Brent made that made their marriage spiral. Renee did as he said and got a job at the club. Brent would often take his friends to the club to watch his wife dancing. And I don't know how you feel about that, but if my wife or girlfriend or whoever was in a strip club, I'm not taking my friends to go watch her. That's just weird. Soon she was able to make around $400 in one night. Actually, at that price, I might do so. This solved their financial problems but exposed their family and marriage to relationship problems. Renee fell in love with the carefree lifestyle of the club. She loved the drinks and the dances. She was especially in love with the people in an intimate way. She started having romantic relationships with women at the club. She would even bring them home at night on some occasions. But weirdly enough, Brent was not just okay with all of that, but also encouraged these actions, and that was his second mistake. And sometimes, once you start going down a rabbit hole, there's no way for you to stop falling. The same happened with Renee. It did not take long for Renee to move on from women and start having extramarital affairs with the men she met at the club. One of these affairs became a real deal. In the spring of 1998, Renee Poole became involved with John Boyd Frazier, a man 26 years her senior. He was a 47-year-old computer tech and a part-time DJ at Silver Fox. He was rich and generous toward the dancers of the club. This pulled Renee toward him and pulled her away from Brent, who was not cooperating with her and insisted on wanting to hang out with his friends instead of helping Renee with their daughter. According to Renee, she wanted to be with John because he did nice things for her. He lit candles and opened car doors for her. Her husband, on the other hand, never did something for her to make her feel loved and happy. He spent all his money on useless stuff, and some of his expenses, for example, his truck payments, were covered by his mother. For Brent, spending money on his family was not his first priority. Renee made it clear that Brent's irresponsible attitude toward their financial troubles were the reason she did not want to be with him. Their marital disputes brought their marriage to the brink, and Renee Poole finally decided to end it all. On May the 7th, 1998, while Brent was at work, Renee took her daughter, packed her stuff, moved out the home, and went over to John's place. When Brent came back home, he was devastated to find that Renee had left him. He apologized to her for his mistakes and wrote letters to convince her to give him another chance. He might have been an irresponsible husband and father, but losing his wife and daughter was something he did not want. And if he needed to change himself for the two to continue their marriage, he was more than willing to do that. In these letters, he went on to say, "I'm sorry that I wasn't the man you wanted me to be. Leaving is not the answer. Together, working this out is the answer. I know you still love me. We've got to talk and work this out. I know that we can get through this." A few days later, Renee went to a divorce lawyer to legally consult her separation from Brent. Her main concern was the money she would get out of the divorce and their daughter's custody. The lawyer told Renee that she stands at a disadvantage in this situation. She's having an extramarital affair and she's a stripper. And it was more than likely that due to this condition, the court was going to give full custody to Brent. And this was something Renee was not willing to accept. She rethought her decision and decided to move back to her marital home. Brent wanted to give their marriage another chance, especially for their daughter's sake. But little did Brent Poole know, his wife was not there to reconcile, but she had other plans. In June, Renee Poole suggested that the family go on a small vacation to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, to celebrate their reconciliation and their upcoming third wedding anniversary. The idea seemed great to Brent. Spending quality family time away from work and other responsibilities was surely going to help mend the broken bonds and encourage affection and love between the couple. The family stayed at Carolina Wind Resorts during their vacation. June the 9th was their anniversary. Renee suggested that Brent and she spend the night alone as a date night. For Brent, this suggestion created hope for the couple to revive feelings of love they had for each other when they were married 3 years earlier. After all, they did pledge love for each other till death separated them. They requested the hotel manager to hire a babysitter to look after their daughter and left the hotel. Now, after having dinner and some drinks, Renee suggested that the two spend some time alone in a secluded area at the beach. Brent happily did as his wife suggested. For him at that time, things could not be better. His rocky relationship with his wife was slowly stabilizing. His hopes for a happy future with a stable family had never been higher, but within hours, fate would prove him wrong. From here on are the details of what happened as told by Renee to the police during her interrogation. Now, while walking back to their hotel around 11:30 p.m, a man dressed in all black and wearing a ski mask approached the two with a gun and threatened Brent to hand over his wallet or else he would pull the trigger. The two cooperated with the robber and Brent handed over his wallet while begging the man to spare his life. Brent said, "Please don't shoot me," to which the robber replied, "Why shouldn't I?" Brent replied, "Because I have a daughter and I love her very much." But the robber was a man with a heart of steel. He ordered Renee to lie down on the beach. She did as he said and closed her eyes. The man then pulled the trigger and a bullet hit Brent in the face. The shot was followed by 3 consecutive shots that missed him, but the 4th bullet hit him. The robber then fled the scene after taking Brent's wallet and his watch. At 11:45 p.m, a patrol officer was on duty patrolling the beach when a distraught Renee ran towards his car and asked for help. The officer came over only to find the dead body of Brent Poole. On June the 10th, 1998, Kimberley Renee Poole, who was 21, became a widow. William Brent Poole, aged 24, was declared dead on June the 10th, 3 years after he married the woman he thought would love him in sickness and in health till death would do them part. The officer informed the police department through the radio, and within a short time, that particular area of the beach was filled with investigators and the forensic team looking for important clues. The forensic team, using the shell casings, determined that the gun used in the crime was automatic or semi-automatic. In addition to Brent's blood, his shirt buttons were also found on the scene. The autopsy report showed that he had been shot once under the chin and once below the left ear. While the forensic team was doing their work, the investigators were scratching their heads over the perplexity of the crime. They thought this all looks a bit mysterious. See, the Myrtle Beach police have never heard of a robbery at the beach, but then a murder. Also, they couldn't wrap their heads around, well, why did the killer leave a witness? Why was Renee spared? That was the question on everyone's mind. Something seemed off. But answering that question could wait, because the police had more dangerous things to worry about. An armed gunman who was not afraid to murder. The police were in a difficult position. Tourism was vital to Myrtle Beach's economy. If the news about the incident spread or the murderer robbed and killed other people, the rush of tourists the city received would shrink down due to safety concerns. The police had no time to waste, and they began to search for the killer. Law enforcement officers brought hound dogs to the beach. The dogs were able to catch the scent of the killer. They followed the scent but lost it at the end of the road. This meant that when the gunman reached the end of the road, he drove away in a vehicle. The police had lost their criminal. At 1 a.m., Renee was taken to the police station. To confirm that Renee was innocent, her hands were checked for gunpowder residue, but the test showed that Renee had never fired that gun. Then Renee was questioned by the police, and she told them what she had witnessed on the beach. The police told Renee that they were confused why the murderer did not shoot her, even though she had witnessed the entire scene. Renee told the police officers, well, he did try and shoot me, but his gun jammed and then he ran away. Her interview was audio recorded. I've requested it. Hopefully I can post it for you soon. At 2 a.m, the police informed Brent's parents about his tragic death. On the phone, Brent's parents told the police that they personally suspect Renee to be involved in the murder. They told the police about the entire history of their dysfunctional marriage. They also informed them about Renee's extramarital affair with John Boyd Fraser, and the police found Brent's parents' suspicions reasonable. The officers knew that a grudge against one spouse can lead someone to do the unthinkable. They called the Winston-Salem Police Department and requested them to send an officer to John Boyd Fraser's home, because if John was not at his home in the early hours of the day, it would not be wrong of the police to suspect that he was driving back from Myrtle Beach. When the Myrtle Beach police asked Renee about the affair, she admitted to the affair but assured the officers and her relationship with John was over. When the police asked Renee, was John the murderer, she said, I don't know, but it could have been him. The investigators were informed by the Winston-Salem Police Department that John was at his home. He answered the door when the officer knocked, and it appeared that he had just woken up. This information slightly disappointed the investigators because it was a nearly 5-hour drive from Myrtle Beach to Winston-Salem, and it would have been really difficult for John to drive from Myrtle Beach and reach home by the early hours of the day. But the police still considered him a suspect. Soon they discovered something that would heighten their suspicions. On the night of the crime, John was supposed to be at work, but he requested to take a leave that night. With this information, police went to visit Renee, who at this point went back and stayed with her parents. They interrogated her again, but this time Renee was accompanied by an attorney who was actually her sister's divorce lawyer. When asked if she thought that John could be responsible for the murder of her husband, she gave the same response as before. She said it could have been. While the interrogation was still in full swing, her attorney requested the police to leave them in the room for a while and let the two talk. The police leave, and then when they came back, Renee, well, she changed her statement. She told the officers that she was certain that the murderer was John Fraser. When asked to back her claim, she said that the man's voice and build matched that of John. So eventually John was arrested on June the 13th and charged with murder. Renee was also arrested on the night of June 13th on the charges of giving false statements to law enforcement officers and obstructing justice. When John was interrogated, he refused to speak without an attorney, so he gave no statements to the police. Renee was interrogated a third time, and during her interrogation, Renee remained adamant about her innocence and argued that the charges against her were unfair. She told the officers that "I didn't lie to you on purpose," and she came off as if she was confused because she did not believe that John was a man who was capable of doing this. This was the vibe that she gave to the police. In her own words, in her heart, she knew that the killer was John, but her mind was not willing to accept it. The police separately interrogated the two for hours, but none of them admitted anything. But the police had other ways in getting the truth out of the two suspects. They resorted to concocting a little lie. They told Renee that John had opened his mouth and given a statement that led them to think that Renee was his accomplice. They also told Renee that if she did not come clean, her daughter might be taken away from her. These lies tore down the strong wall of innocence Renee had built, and she stopped her act of damsel in distress. Renee finally let loose and told the police some secrets she had. She told the officers that John had told her that he was going to do something, but she never took him seriously. Renee also admitted that she knew John would kill Brent that night, and asking Brent to go to the beach was only her way to lure him in and take him to the snake's nest. With this statement, Renee admitted to the police that she was involved in the murder, and this confession was enough to charge Renee with Brent's passing. On June the 14th, Brent Poole was laid to rest in Forsyth Memorial Park, Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Now, going on to the trial, Renee's arraignment was on June the 18th. She pleaded not guilty to the charges. Her attorney argued that her statements during the third interrogation have been misunderstood. Well, I'm sure they were. They claimed she gave a false confession due to the psychological pressure laid on her by the police. Initially, prosecutors sought the death penalty for her, but later dropped it before her trial started. Renee was given the option to plead guilty and be punished for only 30 years in prison, but she was adamant about her innocence and pleaded not guilty, even if it meant that she could be imprisoned for life if convicted. Renee's trial was set for November 1999, before John's trial. Moving on to the trial, the babysitter hired by Brent and Renee in Myrtle Beach was brought to the stand. She told the jury that before leaving the hotel that night, Renee seemed quite uneasy. Before they leave, their daughter started crying. When Brent got busy trying to calm her down, Renee became a little irritated. She wanted them to leave the hotel as soon as possible. The prosecutor argued that the reason behind her anxiousness was that she wanted Brent to arrive at the beach on time for John to carry out the rest of the plan. Another piece of evidence the prosecution brought forward was the witnesses that claimed to have seen John at the beach that night. There were some witnesses, a husband and a wife from Virginia. They were walking on the beach that night and claimed that they saw a man dressed in all black walking on the beach. The man was wearing some kind of mask and kept pulling it up and down on his face, thus allowing the couple to take a glimpse of his face. The couple found this man suspicious and reported him to the police the next day. When the police put photos of multiple men in front of the couple and asked them to identify the man they had seen that night, without hesitation, they both singled out John Boyd Frazier. The prosecution also brought to the stand a man who found Brent's wallet in his yard in his house in Myrtle Beach. The contents of the wallet were a driver's license, credit cards, and $9. Damn, that's more than I have. The prosecution claimed that the motive behind the crime was never a robbery. If it had been a robbery, Brent's wallet with money inside it would never have been tossed in someone else's home. The prosecution also provided a motive behind the crime. They claimed Renee wanted Brent to divorce money and wanted her daughter all to herself. But the divorce was not allowing that to happen, so she resorted to other means to get it. The other way was simple. Just kill Brent. She had planned Brent's murder with John Fraser. Her job was to deliver Brent to him, and John's part was to pull the trigger. And then, after, the two would live happily ever after. Also, the prosecution's strongest evidence was the tape recordings from the interrogations. In particular, the recording of Renee confessing to being involved in Brent's murder. These recordings were played in court. Now, the defense argued that due to darkness and the lack of any artificial lights, it would have been quite difficult for the witnesses to see the face of the man clearly on the beach the night of the crime. The defense's main task was to prove that Renee's confession was a false confession. To do this, they argued that the interrogators had lied to Renee about John putting the blame on her. Well, no, it's her fault for falling for it. The defense argued this was an unethical way, but the police insisted that they were allowed to lie if it could help them reach the truth. The defense also brought a psychiatrist to the stand, and during the trial, the psychiatrist heard the confessions on the audio tapes, and the psychiatrist confirmed that Renee was acting under PTSD. It was claimed that due to Renee's disturbed mental state, the investigators easily convinced her into thinking that she was actually involved in the murder. The investigators kept psychologically torturing her. They emotionally blackmailed her by saying that she would not be able to see her daughter if she did not confess. But to be fair, what mother could have confessed in such a situation? The defense also claimed that the Myrtle Beach police were desperate to charge someone with Brent's murder so that no questions could be raised about the safety of the city, and the person they chose to accuse was Renee, a widow still mourning the sudden death of her husband. Now the trial ended on November 12th. After 8 hours of deliberation, on November 13th, 1999, the jury found Renee guilty of murder and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She is currently serving her sentence in Leith Institution in Greenwood. Frazier, on the other hand, was also tried and found guilty of murder, armed robbery and criminal conspiracy. He was sentenced to 30 years behind bars. He is serving his sentence in Tiger River Institution and is set to be released in November 2029. Now regarding Kimberley, there is a small movement to free Kimberley Poole. She still claims that she's innocent and that she was forced to confess. In 2019, Renee was recognized by South Carolina State Representative John R. McCravey for her community service. She made hats for senior citizens and infants to wear during the cold winter. She also writes school books in Braille for blind children. Her daughter Katie will turn 27 in 2022. She was raised mainly by Brent's family, but there are claims that Renee's family also made their contributions to her upbringing. While Katie was growing up, Renee paid monthly child support during her teenage years. It does seem to be the case that Katie's relationship with her mother is quite good. Now when we look back at the story, we can see the decline started when Renee had to work. Not her having to work per se, but the fact that Brent told her, hey, go be a stripper. And once she entered that life, she saw another world. I mean, think about it. These two were in like childhood sweethearts. Not really, but like high school sweethearts. You see what I'm saying? Right? She didn't date many other men, it seemed like. He didn't date any other women. And it seemed maybe at that point, once she got a taste of the devil's juice, if you like, she wanted it more and more. And Brent seemed like he wanted it too. And to me, Brent kind of got lost in his life after this happened. To him, he forgot what his marriage was all about. He'd rather hang out with his friends. He'd rather go to other clubs and bars and chase that high life than maybe he gave up so early by getting married so young. Either way, doesn't matter. Brent did not deserve what happened to him. Renee does deserve life in prison. So why don't you comment? Tell me what you think.